Hi guys. I'm gonna see if anyone gets on right now. If not, I'm just gonna start recording. So I tried hosting a live earlier today and for some reason it didn't work. I don't know what I did. And it still was saving for like the longest time. And then it just disappeared. So I don't know what I did. So I'm like, okay, let me just do this real quick this time. So at least I got to practice, I guess. Hopefully this one's shorter since I already practiced. But yeah, so I'm just gonna get started because I'm just gonna see if I could save this one right this second time through, right? So the last 2 Sundays I've been focusing on life purpose, and it is called, like, my series is called Sunday Solutions. So the point of Sunday Solutions is so I don't attend a church on Sunday. I don't believe really in organized, not really, I don't believe in organized religion. I am very spiritual in the sense that I have like a relationship with God, and I do believe in God, and I do believe in faith and hope and all these things. I do think that the universe is like this big divine creation, right? And so I just don't believe with attending churches, in which, I mean, if you go to church, that's fine, but that's just kind of to give you an overview of some of the stuff that I do for my Sundays. So my Sundays are usually my day of reflection, my day to gather my thoughts for the week and, focus on my goals for the week. What kind of what kind of emotions I'm looking to have, if that makes sense. Like, not have, which ones am I trying to evoke, like good feelings and things like that. What moments am I looking forward to, etc., right? Okay, so from that, so for today's, hi Pamela. So for today's Sunday solution, it is part 3, and so that is the orange circles that I have been posting on Sundays, the life purpose circles. And so I'll post them after this live, but I wanted to talk about the third section because, so the first Sunday we focused on circle 1, last Sunday circle 2, so this Sunday circle 3, but I feel like 3 gets tricky if it's not talked about or discussed, because you're mixing your life purpose with your passion and your story and your job, and how to turn your vocation into, something that you can nurture and be passionate about and play on your strengths. So all of that, right? So combining everything to get to section 4 pretty much is like we're in this big cycle of 1 through 4. And so starting at 1 is like finding your focus, right? So for myself personally, my focus, like I've been working on this for a while. I made it a goal to focus on my mental health this year. That is my top priority. Earlier this year, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And so through that, I've been able to really self-discover and dig deeper within myself. I've been able to research my diagnosis, and the thing about it that was so empowering was that I finally had an answer for all these, depression episodes, these moments where I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was really affirming, and being able to know what it was that was hindering me as a person, and what was so heavy on my soul and heavy as just, a human being. And it's been a rough journey, a PTSD. Some of the other things that come with that are depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and just, and so it's a whirlwind of things. And before it was like, oh my gosh, I have all these issues, right? And so I'm like freaking out because I'm like, what's wrong with me? What the hell? Like, I don't know what to do anymore. And when my therapist told me it was PTSD, and we talked about this, and that day I got together with some of my best friends, and just cried together and talked about this and worked through it that day all together. And the biggest thing that I could take away from this was that I just need to live in that story and sharing that, because I know I'm not the only one that has gone through these different issues in life, especially like as a first gen American and just first gen, like a lot of the first gen students and things like that within our cultures, we can relate on these different topics. You know, our parents grew up in a different culture, and compared to the what we have now, it is so different to what a lot of our parents had gone through and experienced. And like, our parents were so much younger than us. So the families now, they're starting to get a little older, like, you know, as far as like waiting to have children, etc., right? There's all these different things, like and so culture is changing, society is changing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people keep saying like, oh, we need to, you know, oh, like in the old days, and but instead of focusing on all these things that we loved about the past, like no one is doing anything about the things that are happening in our future. And that's where I think it is so important as like the millennial generation that we take a hold of our story and change lives and be able to transform our society into something that is so much better and so much bigger than ourselves. Just combining, you know, meeting other people and empowering each other, and just, you know, craving human connection. And like, so my first circle, right, for my life purpose activity, my focus and my why, right? Hi, babe. So my focus and my why. So the why, I'm doing all of this for myself, like my life purpose, is because I want human connection. I want to be intentional about my mission, and I want to tap into my strengths, right? So meaning tapping into my strengths. I take assessments all the time for my job. Like, I have so many opportunities for like different professional developments and workshops where I'm able to reflect and grow and, you know, and use these tools in different ways and apply them to my life, apply them to other, you know, my relationships and stuff and my family. And so I think that has been like one of the biggest game changers, is figuring out what it is I'm good at and what exactly it is that I'm good at. Yeah, like, you know, one of so like my top five strengths, right? So one of them is empathy, and that is something that I like have been trying to tap into for so long. Going through my depression and everything, I felt like I was just like very hard. And it was really rough. Yeah. And so just, you know, the journey of healing and recovering and all of that, it really brought up like a different connection within like me and my partner, me and my friends. Just, you know, that we, like, as humans, we crave human connection, you know. And so tapping into your empathy, it is, I feel like it's so hard to learn, but it is so able, you know, you're capable of learning it because you practice it on a daily basis. Like, the more you get into it and the more you understand the meaning of empathy, I think that is like one of the biggest, you know, like game changers for everybody. Like, for myself, like that's how I get a lot of my human connection, is like, because that is something that I honestly, like, I love talking to people. I love having really deep, insightful conversations. I love talking about self-growth, resources, books, all that stuff. And it is something that I'm very passionate about. And through my journey of discovering myself, I've been able to help like my friends, and we've been able to work on our friendships, and my sister Katie and I, and we've been like taking, you know, talking about it, and she's been so supportive. And then my boyfriend Ray, and so like it's so awesome to like learn about these different things. So like the one I discuss all the time is the Enneagram. And Enneagram pretty much its goal is to give you an insightful view of yourself. What ways can you self-grow? What are recommended self-growths for you? Different issues that come up with you in different type combos, and like how you guys can deflect, you know, any, like not any, like how can you work through your issues together and what each person brings to your relationship. And so I think learning about yourself in those ways is so key and vital to figuring out what it is that are your strengths. So Enneagram is what I love because for assessments, because of the self-growth portion of it and like the mentality part of it and the brain work. And just when I took my Enneagram, what I did is I printed it and then I highlighted every single thing that I related to and then just kind of reflected on that and, you know, taking it in and seeing the connections in my results with me personally and internally, me as a stepmother, me as a partner for, you know, my boyfriend, as a daughter, like those different aspects, you know, applying it into like, oh, how did this, you know, play out in my childhood or my relationship with my sisters, just those different things. And one of the biggest things that I've learned from that is that like my compassion and my courage and my vulnerability, like they're all results of my empathy. And that is the biggest strength that I have been trying to nurture the most, because that is where I feel I could, you know, find my purpose, my whole center of why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm sharing my content, why I am, you know, working on all these different methods and content for you guys in a way to house it so that we can have these safe conversations where we can have deep, insightful conversations. We as a society, we're, you know, social media, TV, just screen time is such a huge deal. And it is so worshipped, and it's so sad because I feel like we're getting so stuck in like this numbing mindset of like tuning out our own brain thoughts, our own brain work, our own whatever, you know, like you get on Instagram and you're scrolling for like 30 minutes and then you like look at the clock and you're like, oh my gosh, it's actually been an hour since I've been on Instagram. And then you're like, I just wasted an hour of my life. I mean, and I do it too, and that's the thing, is like we've been trying to be so much more intentional about less screen time and more presence, because I think too, like that is where you're able to connect with people on a real level. And so yeah, so like decreasing that and just like, because I mean, if you're on Instagram for an hour just scrolling, right, so that's an hour a day, 7 days a week, let's just put it that way, in the morning. So that's 14 hours or 7 hours. What the heck? So it's 7 hours. If you do that again before you go to bed, that's 14. So he's like, you could have spent 14 hours focusing on, you know, something that you're passionate about, or reading a book or a book about yourself. Like there's books on the Enneagram, and you could literally find books on your type and just read forever learning about yourself. And it is so addicting because naturally as human beings we are so selfish. Like one thing that I've been like reflecting on a lot lately is like, when you focus on hating yourself, who do you think about the most? Well, of course it's yourself, right? Because naturally that's who we're always going to think is like, oh, me first, me first. And it's just natural, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just what comes with being a human. And the thing about it though is that we are so mean to ourselves in that way, and we'd rather have more empathy for other people and less empathy for ourselves. But the thing is, we can't have empathy for other people, like be passionate about it and be giving about it, if we don't have enough empathy for ourselves. And that is where finding your purpose and your focus is so important, you know, and cultivating your strengths. Because it wasn't until I started my journey of recovery with PTSD, and I mean, I've been going to therapy for years and doing those kinds of things and working on myself that way, but I've never been like super intentional about like researching and asking for a diagnosis and actually knowing what it was that I'm going through and all this stuff, right? And so with that, like, you know, I've just been able to like share my story now and practice my vulnerability, having the courage to practice my vulnerability. Like that's been huge through this whole cycle of, you know, breaking down what is my focus, breaking down why that is my focus, breaking down just like my strength is empathy. Okay, so what are results of empathy? That is compassion, that is courage, and that is vulnerability. Those all come with empathy because you learn that through the different situations that you fall into. And so, like this morning, I went to go pick up my car, and I stopped at the gas station. Ray had gave me $20 in cash. So I'm getting to the gas station at Fred Meyer, and I'm turning in, and there's an old man, and he's just standing at the corner. He's a homeless man. And so I stopped and got out of my car. I gave him the $5, and he was like very grateful about it. And it was like the strangest feeling. Like it was just like this huge, like deep, just like that, like I'm very, very intuitive. And he like hugged me, and it just like, it like really like just, I was so like overwhelmed with like feeling like, oh my goodness, like this man just like is so grateful for like $5, And the funny thing is like I spent $5, on coffee the day before, and it's like it's no big deal for us. And for him it was like he's just trying to find money to pay for his medications. And so but that's after the fact. So I went and put gas. I'm coming back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to make eye contact with him, because I know in my heart that I like need to talk to him or interact with him or connect with him. It's just, it's that feeling of wanting to have that intent and putting what I've been practicing into action through my community, through my people, through my family, like, spreading that in your circles and wherever you're at, honestly. And so I was like gonna turn the opposite way, and then I swerved back, and I went and I talked to him. And while I was talking to him, I just kind of asked him like, hey, like, do you need anything else? Like, is there something I can get you? Those questions. And because a couple weeks back, I had read an article about how we need to treat homeless people like human beings, because honestly they are human beings, and regardless of their situation or not, I don't think that determines whether they're a good person or not. And a lot of the times we don't acknowledge homeless people, and people I hear like, oh, like, why would you give them money? Like, what if they go and like buy drugs with it or do this? It's like, that's just a stereotype of homeless people. And it's like, not all of them are on drugs, and not all of them are in this situation because they purposely wanted to be there, This guy was just so like, oh, I'm homeless, because I'm like, oh, like, do you have somewhere to go? And he's like, no, I have no family. And like, he was just so like normal, like, this is just my everyday life. And it was so heartbreaking to me. And so I was like, did you have breakfast? Like, I can go get you some food. Do you want to come with me? He didn't want to come with me. He wanted to stay and make money for his pills, because he had an infection in like his lungs a couple days ago, and they gave him antibiotics, and now he needs to buy his prescription. And so we're talking about all this stuff, right? And so I'm like asking him if he's hungry. He tells me that I can get him a cheeseburger, trying to be super minimal. He did not want me to like spend my money, is what it felt like. So I went and I got him a cheeseburger meal from McDonald's, and I came back and I gave it to him. But like with all of that, like we were just talking, and he's just, I'm telling him like that I can, because I was telling him that I can help him get his prescriptions for cheaper, because just for like the sake of saving time and stories and stuff. I told him that my husband, I was like, works at the hospital. I was like, and they have this app that they told us about, and you can get your prescriptions for a cheaper price with the coupon. And that's how I've gotten my antidepressants when I don't have my insurance. And so that's how I know about it, because we've used it. And so I'm like telling this man, I'm like, so I tell him, like, I give him my phone number, I tell him my name, and I'm like, call me once you talk to your doctor and tell them to send it to Costco, and I'll come get you and I'll take you to Costco. And so in all of this, across the way in the parking lot, he's like, hey, that guy is like, yelling at that girl, and he's been doing it this whole time, and he's like, I don't want to get in their business. And like, it made me sad, because I'm like, well, why didn't he walk over and say anything, too? And I'm like, wait, what? And I was like, what am I supposed to do about it? So there I go, get in my car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't think about it. I just drove straight over to that couple that was arguing, and they were in two separate cars. And this guy was yelling at the girl. They had 3 kids in the backseat of her car, and then it looked like it was a co-parenting situation. So I looked at everything, and I was able to kind of just pick up on what was going on. I mean, we've been in similar situations. It's co-parenting is really hard when you have so many people involved and a child, you know. And so I kind of just, like, from that, my own experience of that, and then her being a girl, and, like, you know, no one's helping her, and there's all these people at the gas station and no one's offering to help this girl. And so she's just crying, and, like, they're yelling, and he, like, body slammed her on the hood of her car, like, all mad and just being so crazy. So, like, I get out of the car, I pull up, I park in front of her, get out of the car, and, like, I was not even, like, just fully thinking. I just was, like, so worked up because I was so just like, oh my gosh, like, no one's helping this girl. No, like, this guy is being crazy. And I tell him, I'm like, hey, or look at both of them. I was like, is everything okay? But, like, mainly, like, towards him, obviously. And in that time, he gave her back her car keys, which is what they were fighting about as well. Is, like, he wasn't wanting her to leave. He wanted to talk to her. So he took away her car keys. And their kids are crying in the back seat, and, like, oh my gosh, it was so sad. And there's 3 of them, and, like, there's 2 little boys and a little girl, and she's just crying and crying. And then the mom is crying, and this guy is just, like, being so horrible and saying such horrible things. So I'm, like, standing by her, like, letting her, like, buckle her daughter and stuff. And he rolls down his window to tell her some other stuff, and he's like, I'm gonna follow you home, and I know where you live, and all this stuff. So then I was like, oh, okay. So then I'm like, let me take a picture of his license plate so I can call the cops, right? So that's what I did, and I told him, hey, I just took a picture of your license plates. If you follow her home, I'm going to call the cops. I was like, I'm gonna tell you that if you follow her, they're gonna be following you. And he didn't really say anything, right? And she just was like, okay. So she's getting in her car, and she kind of sat there for a little bit. I think she was waiting for him to leave first, but he didn't. Or to leave first, yeah. And so he did, but he kind of, like, took off and, like, parked somewhere. And so then I got in my car, and I looked up, and we, like, made eye contact, her, this girl, and I. And before I got in, I had asked her, she's fine. But yeah, so then I'm, like, in my car, and I'm like, are you okay? Like, and I'm on the phone, 911, like, trying to call the cops. And then she's like, thank you, like, it was just mouthed it, and it was just, like, this weird, like, woman to woman moment, and, like, mother. And I'm like, I just, oh my goodness, it was so sad. And it was just, like, my morning was just, like, so full of, like, oh my gosh, ew, what did I do? So full of, like, all these little moments. And then, like, my niece, like, choked on a dice this morning, and my boyfriend, he's a nurse, and so he, like, took over that situation, and I, like, went to, like, my head immediately, like, evaluating that situation after the fact. Like, things happened the way it should, and it was just, like, the most intense morning I've had. Like, it was just everywhere, because, you know, it was so scary. And so yeah, I'm like, I've had so much gratitude today, you know, just for, like, my circle, and all the good things that have been coming from me really focusing on my purpose and my discoveries, and being intentional about all the things that I'm doing and the things that I'm saying and the conversations that I'm having with people, because I've had some really deep, genuine conversations with people that I didn't expect to have. Like, I've had people reaching out to me that we haven't talked in such a long time. Like, my relationship with my boyfriend, like, we've been working on it differently, focusing, like, on our weaknesses and strengths through Enneagram. And it's just, oh my goodness, it has been so amazing to be on this journey. And it just, like, I feel like it just continues to get better as the year progresses. And I'm like, and now it's spring, and there's sun, and it's just so much better. So yeah, so, like, all of this, you know, to say, like, if you really focus and break it down, like, step by step, it is so much easier, and you have so much more guidance of what you want to do and accomplish and where you want to get, right? So, like, taking these assessments, learning about yourself, focusing on your own health and your own mental stability and your own internal stuff that you've been dealing with, your traumas, whatever it is. Because, I mean, at some point we all have some type of trauma, right? And that's, like, where my mind went to for my niece, is just, like, those little moments are different things that affect children as they're growing. And it's like, if we're sitting here and being intentional about how we're living our lives, we're gonna continue to show these patterns and instill that in our children. And one of the biggest things that I've always remember is that I read a quote and it was like, millennials are gonna raise the most sensitive children. And it's so funny because sensitive sounds like they're trying to put it in this negative light, but there's nothing wrong with being sensitive. Like, I'm HSP, and that's called highly sensitive person. So it comes with being super intuitive. It also comes with being a type 6, Enneagram type 6, and I am ENFP for MBTI, and like all these things, right? So you see all these connections between these different assessments, these different books, your mental health and your life, and you just discovering yourself and getting out of your comfort zone and actually doing the things to get out of it. Because everyone always is like, oh, you need to step out of your comfort zone, right? But what we don't get is like, no one teaches us how to do that. No one tells us how to get out of that. And that's where the Enneagram is so helpful, in the sense that it gives you self-growth recommendations and you can use that as a guide for yourself. And oh my gosh, I keep doing that because I was like, ew. Okay, anyways. So yeah, and so I've been practicing all these things. I've been focusing on all these things. And the thing about like this morning, I honestly feel that this morning wouldn't have happened if I had not been on this journey. At least not the way it did, because I see all of my, like, me playing to my strengths and having that courage and just being stronger and, you know, more confident in that sense that like, okay, like, I mean, I walked up to this guy and yeah, he was scary, and yeah, because I mean, he's yelling and being all intense this morning, and it's like, I wasn't like scared. Like, I just was like, oh my God, I don't know who I am right now, but I like felt so strong, you know, like defending this girl. Cause I'm just like, and I think too, that plays into like being the oldest of the sisters. You know, like you have that role of protection naturally, and it just comes natural to me. So I think it was just all of that encompassed together. And then that's where like I could see my feminism like coming out in me, you know, like empowering and being there for other women. And we talk about all this like rape culture and all these like different things, but it's like all these people at Fred Meyer were watching this girl get yelled at and thrown to her car, and nobody stepped in and nobody said anything. Then my mind goes, okay, is this a culture thing? Because all of these people right here were white, and this girl's Mexican, and this guy is Mexican, and I'm this Mexican girl that came to freaking tell him and to back off. Like, is literally what it looks like, because nobody did anything. And that's the thing that made me the most sad, because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where my compassion and my empathy are like, well, damn, like if that was me, I really wish someone would have done something for me, you know, like that's where my mind goes. And that's where compassion and empathy are huge, in putting yourself in other people's shoes and trying to experience in your mind what they're going through, you know, like trying to relate on their level. I think that's where you can play into that a lot too. So yeah, and so I'm like, none of this would have been really like, it wouldn't have really happened if it wasn't that I've been focusing on human connection. I've been focusing on being intentional about my mission, about tapping into my strength. Like those 3 things are like my whys, right? So I'm like, that's why I've been sharing my content online. That's why I've been being so transparent with my journey and trying to encourage others to do the same and to self-grow. I think we've have like this negative notion of that self-growth is such a bad thing sometimes, because of the stereotypes, you know, you're like, oh, something's wrong with me, or, you know, or I don't like, or I'm fine the way I am. And I think that's a huge thing that I see in my culture, is that, you know, our parents are like, oh, like they're right, like they're like, they had no time to be depressed, and so they think we should have no time to be depressed. But the thing is, we're obviously living different lives in different times than our parents. And then that's where I think too, it is so important for you to discover yourself and to focus on that and cultivate that. Like what, like okay, so like just pretend you've had a Bible like your whole life that included your parents' rules, your, you know, grandma and grandpa's rules, your church, whatever it is that had rules that set standards for yourself, right? And that was your guide, right? And then you leave home and this is all you have, so you're sticking and you're clinging to that so tightly. And then after when you're on your own, like little by little, you start to see that you start to pull away as yourself growing from those beliefs of what is in this book. And you're technically just, finding yourself and finding your values, finding what it is that you believe in, finding what it is that you need to work on in yourself and what it is that you're passionate about. And I think people are so afraid to let go and have that space from family because it is lonely and it's sad, and it sad in a good way, because you are really focusing on discovering yourself and setting boundaries with yourself and boundaries with people around you, and just holding. Sorry, my phone is on low battery. But holding, what was I saying? Okay, yeah, and so sorry that I get thrown off so fast if that happens. But anyways, oh my goodness, I like lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I guess, all this to say that if you really want to self-grow, like do the hard work, like have these hard questions and conversations with yourself and your family. Like, like when I first started my blog, one conversation that I had with my sister Katie was like, why aren't you really like talking to me like through my online, like just that vulnerable moment of like, oh, it could have gone, you don't know how the outcome of what's gonna happen. And like that's the biggest thing about vulnerability, like being open with this. Like my whole family doesn't get all this stuff that I've been through, which is okay, and I'm okay with that. It is hard, okay? And I didn't say that self-growth was easy. So I think it gets to that point where you get lonely because you feel like you're not heard, you feel like you're misunderstood. It's different, but in a good way, and I feel like you start to see all these cycles, and you start to practice more compassion, you start to practice more empathy, and you start to give people more chances. You start to give, you start seeing people in a different light when you focus that way. And it is, being so vulnerable is hard, and letting go of what you've known for like the first 18 or whatever, how many years you've been at home with your parents, or like or all the things that you've been through, letting go of these rules and like really focusing on what it is that you're about and what your values are and your morals and what are your interests. Like that is where cultivating like this energy for self-growth is so important, and being able to learn what it is you want out of life, what it is that you want your focus to be as you go through your day, and as you move on through your careers, as your families. It really changes you and transforms you through like for myself, like being a parent, being a sister, being a friend, being a partner. But it's not to say that I have all the answers and that I know everything and I'm so wise and all these things, because that's some bullshit. And so, but the thing that I'm trying to get across is that I'm trying to be so transparent about all of this because I think we need more transparency. I think people need to more in-depth things. Like we're so caught up on like outfits of the days on Instagram and all these things that we want to buy and all these things that we want to be, and we're sacrificing our own mental health and our own self for success and money and jobs and careers. But like if your mental health is at stake and you're not focusing on that, how are you supposed to get ahead and help other people? Like that's the thing, that's the hard part. So yeah, and so I kind of just like broke it down. So I've been like reading off my whiteboard because I wrote everything down that I'm trying to focus on for you guys in this live, because I want my lives to have more structure. And so yeah, to say that if I didn't focus on my focus and my why, like none of my compassion, strengths, and empathy, all that, the recap of everything that happened this morning at Fred Meyer wouldn't have been possible if I wasn't intentional about putting my focus into action and figuring out how and what feelings I want to tap into and like what I want to work on, those different things. So it's like self-growth is like a forever evolving relationship with yourself. It's this huge cycle of, you know, you're focusing on this and you're getting this, and then you just keep going throughout the life purpose circles, you know, like 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I have, and I'll post those after again. And you really go through the motions of that and focus on different things. And like the more you learn and the more you grow, the more you start to see yourself, like your goals and your life, everything come into a different light, and like your goals like coming into fruition and being more intentional about those things. And so I think that's why it's so important to focus on your life purpose. And so that's pretty much it for today. And so I hope you enjoyed today's Sunday Solutions, and that you go into this week, you know, thinking about your life purpose, that you go into this week thinking about what it is that you want to accomplish and get out of life. Why? Like, if you weren't able to figure out the why and you can break it down, oh my goodness, like you are going to see such a different person, that, you know, someone that you're like, okay, now I'm starting to feel whole again. I'm starting to feel like myself and happier. I'm, you know, more content with what I'm doing, and that I'm pursuing these passions, you know. So like for me, like my passions are mental health, advocacy, and feminism being like, you know, equality within every aspect of life that you can think of, equal access to mental health, equal access to healthcare, equal access for, you know, education, like all these different things. And I've been able to figure out all these things. I'm like, I know I've been passionate about them, but I didn't know it was to this extreme until I started to nurture my inner self and figuring out what it is that triggers me, what it is that, how can I cope, how can I be better, how can I tap into my strengths. And that's where the assessments like Enneagram and MBTI, all of those are so vital in your self-growth journey, because you're able to identify trouble spots, you're able to put them into practice and nurture them and try to make them, you know, like how can you deflect, how can you not deflect, how can you cope through that, how can you work through it, you, your partner, like applying them. Like everybody around me so far has pretty much taken the Enneagram, because I will like tell everybody about it, because I'm like, these are conversations that I want to have with all my friends, because it's also really good insight for myself, so, and like getting like my content done. So all that to say that I hope you can, you know, see some light from what I have shared, are able to relate. And if you have any questions or, you know, whatever it is, like go ahead and message me. I love having deep, insightful conversations. I plan to put together a template kind of content thing, worksheet of what I talked about today. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, but it's going to be similar to like the life purpose circles. And so I'll post the life purpose circle after I post this live. Again, I'm like still so sorry that I posted about my video earlier. I don't know what happened to it, but it's whatever, because actually I really like this video way better. So it was good practice. That's just all I'm going to say. So this is take 2, right? But yeah, so the other thing actually that I need to tell you guys was that my website is going to be going live on April 1st. So like mark your calendars. I'll post it on Instagram, I'll post it on Snapchat, and I'll spread it around. But yeah, so I've been working on that like crazy. So I've been kind of like backing down in the content on my stories, because I'm like, I'm flooding everybody and I feel so bad, and I don't like it either, like that much, like posting too much on the story. So yeah, so my website's gonna house like a ton of my content, and so I'll just keep you updated that way. And oh yeah, and I'll be blogging too. So I haven't decided how I'm gonna do that yet, but I'm intertwining, or like, you know, going back and forth between doing like a feminism post, then a mental health post, and like back and forth, because those are the two things I love to talk about all the time. But yeah, so yeah, have a good night and have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you guys on Friday for Friday Femme Talks. And yeah, good night.